In the Lab, a Texans podcast that takes a different look at things. Drew Dougherty and John Harris have their lab coats and goggles on, and the Bunsen burners burning. Here's Drew.
Hello, friends. Welcome into In the Lab. Waving his waggly hands is my good pal, John Harris. I'm Drew Dougherty. We're happy that you're with us today. John, how you been, bud?
I'm doing very, very well. I don't know if the people can see my wall decoration. This is really, it's not me. We had an intern by the name of Nick Patterson who was absolutely awesome. And during COVID, he was part of tier 2, which I was too, and Tyler Sutter. So I'm in the part that was his office. So I'm not bothering Suds on the other side while he's doing his work.
Oh,
so that's why I'm in here. So my friends from Texags were like, dude, you just start throwing Mardi Gras beads up after a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I didn't see it, but it's cool. It gives it a vibe, as the kids say nowadays.
Yes, a vibe. Yeah, we talked. I wrote a little blurb about the vibe in the Texans locker room on the training fields, based off of what we heard from Justin Britt, and KPL last week. Ken Pierre Lewis, a linebacker who comes to the Texans from Washington. These guys have been around. They actually played together in Seattle, which was where Britt spent his entire career before missing last season. And while I don't want to go deep into each of their careers as like a conversation today, I do want to talk about, like, there is a different idea around the Texans because there's so many new faces, and I don't want to get too far into culture because I think culture is important, but I think culture is overplayed sometimes. You're never going to see a Super Bowl champion that's culture. It's an actual team. Players win titles. Good players win titles. So culture can be important, but I think if you have good players and you get all that stuff figured out, that's way more important. But they're pumped, and it's fun seeing this coaching staff and who's on it. You've got guys who've had success as head coaches in Lovie Smith. Romeo Crennel is an advisor now, but he's around and he's helping out. Culley's obviously the man in charge. But, like, for example, John, yesterday I was doing some research because I was doing a little listicle thing on Robert Prince, the wide receivers coach. Yeah. And there is a phenomenal article that was written last September-ish, and then it was republished December 24th, I think, when Prince had to take over and be the interim coach for the Lions on Christmas Eve because of COVID. But he was nicknamed by the Detroit receivers the CEO, the chief energy officer, because they said he'd go into the weight room and he would do muscle ups. So, like, if you don't know what a muscle up is, this is a chin up or a pull up. I'm sorry. Chin up's like this. You're just getting your chin above the bar. Muscle ups are like you're going all the way up and you're getting your whole body above the bar. And he's doing that. And he's very, very serious. He was getting on guys like Danny Amendola, Galladay, Marvin Jones, guys who've been around, and he made them better. They've all said that to him, man. So you have like 150-yard receiving day. He's going to be on you about why you should have had 215 because of this, and this. It's a very interesting makeup of coaches. He coached in Japan, in Tokyo back in the mid and late 90s. This guy's been around. They've seen things. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this all translates, if it does, to success on the field in the fall.
I think one of the things I've thought this about coaching. It's funny. I really come up with this philosophy, but it hit me. I was a head coach in Florida, and I went to a clinic, and it was run by a friend of mine's dad, who I've gotten to be friends with over the years, Larry Zerline. And Larry was the offensive line coach at University of Cincinnati. And I hadn't seen Coach Z in years. And I was so proud because now I was a head coach and I was going to go see him at this clinic that he was speaking. And so he was speaking on a Friday night and everybody else was speaking on a Saturday. And they were just trying to get this clinic off the ground. And so they had a few guys speaking. And I just remember going in and Coach Z was drawing up a gap play, which is kind of like a power play, but with a little nuance different with the gap play. Because your gap and power used a lot as nomenclature, kind of similar. And so he goes through this, and as he's going through it, he's talking about, well, when I had this sort of offensive lineman, here was a little wrinkle we used because he couldn't do this, but he could do this. But then we had this offensive lineman, and he wasn't really good at this, and he was sort of shorter, so we invented this technique. And he talked about all the different things they did because all the different players that he had been around. Well, the next day, I went to go see, it was a defensive line coach at a major Power 5 university. And he was just talking about defensive line, and he put up this video of an All-American player, a guy who would end up going in the pros as a first-round draft pick. And he's showing the different skills and the different things that he could do technique-wise. And I'm watching it going, I don't have anybody like that guy. I don't have anybody like that guy. And as he continued going on, he would talk about the things that he would do in large part because he had that guy. And I'm like, well, wait a second.
Yeah.
I don't have that. And that's what made me think of Coach Z the next day, because he had been at Tulane, he'd been at Cincinnati. He didn't have the 5-star players. They had to develop guys from what they had and took what they had and give it to players. And once Coach Z got to the NFL and he could take some of those things that he learned and he could put it with that talent, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that's a pretty good marriage. But this coach is basically putting up like, well, yeah, just do it like this. Well, yeah, you can do that with that guy. He's amazing. But if that's all you know, then you're never going to be able to coach your way out of paper bag. And so that's why I love seeing coaches that have different experiences that they can bring to it, whether it's in a different league, whether it's with different types of players. They can take that and then add it to their coaching repertoire and end up being an instructive asset for those particular players, as opposed to, well, let's just roll out the balls and play because you guys have better talent than everybody else. So I love coaches that have been around and they've seen the best and they've seen the worst. And so they can adapt based on what they've seen before. And a guy with such a traveled history, some people are like, well, he's never in the same place year after year. But in the end, what that does is it makes that coach that much more adaptable to the situation that he's going to see, not only in the same building year to year, but in the league year to year, because it's going to change every single year. So I love CEO. That's a good one.
I want to jump on that. You just bring that up. So you're talking about coaching in general, but for example, Prince, he has, like you said, been around to a lot of different spots. Now, Detroit was where he was the longest. He had been there since 2014 and he stuck there. That's a long time. It's different than his record because he was there through 3 different ownerships, through 3 different coaches. He was hired by Caldwell, stuck through all that, through that coaching change. But before that, he had bounced around. He'd been to Boise, Colorado State, Portland. I mean, he basically did a tour of the whole upper Northwest, the great Northwest. He was like Lewis and Clark boiled into a football coach. He's from California. He was born in Okinawa, lived his first 7 years there. So he had been around and then found stability these last few years. And it was fascinating to see. And then talking about offensive line, because you just brought up Coach Zerline. Well, the new offensive line coach is James Campen, spent an eternity in Green Bay. I think there might be only one other assistant coach who was ever there for a longer duration than Campen was when I was doing the research on him. And I mean, think about it. Who's the signature name that he coached probably on the offensive line? David Bakhtiari.
Bakhtiari, yep.
David Bakhtiari wasn't the 2nd or 3rd overall pick of the draft, was he, John?
No, he wasn't even close. I don't know what his overall position was, but I know he was drafted in the 4th round. So you're talking at least.
And by no means am I saying that, Bakhtiari is who he is solely because of Campen. He's not. You give the credit to Bakhtiari, but you got to think Campen played a little bit of a role in it and could maybe accentuate some of the stuff that he's got to work with here, perhaps.
No doubt. I mean, Bakhtiari was 109 overall. And look, that was probably a combination of teams going, well, I don't know. I don't see the athleticism. I don't know. And then you get a guy like that falls to the 4th round. But I guarantee you sat with David Bakhtiari and you said, hey, what did James Campen mean to your development? I would imagine you get a pretty good earful. And that's the thing, when you look at the Packers over the years that Campen was there, they did not put a 1st round, 2nd round emphasis much of the time, if at all, on offensive linemen. I remember Jason Spriggs was drafted. I can't remember. I think he was late. Was he 1st round, 2nd round? I can't remember. I think he was 2nd. He's 2nd round pick. But he was about the only one I can remember that was a high pick that really didn't pan out. But guys like TJ Lang, Corey Linsley, Bakhtiari, those guys all really developed under James Campen. Brian Balaga was another guy. Now he was a 1st rounder, but he was another guy that developed and was the rock on that right side where Bakhtiari was over on the left side. So that's the thing that I'd love to see. And it kind of goes back to my thought with Coach Z, was just about how you develop these players, because what's going to work, and think about our offensive line for a second. Larry Tunsil could probably do anything athletically that any offensive lineman in the league can do.
Yep.
That any lineman can do. He's going to be different from Titus. So a technique that could work for Laramie may not work for Titus. Now, there might be some things for Titus, because Titus is, I think, a little bit more powerful. There might be some technique that Titus is going to be able to use that maybe Laramie doesn't use or isn't effective using. So as a coach, you've got to be able to say to those guys, you can't say across the board, well, my two tackles should be using these different techniques or these techniques. No, one might do one thing, one might do the other. The magic of coaching is knowing that, okay, I'm getting the max out of them and they're doing it the way that makes sense for them and that makes sense for the team. And that's what I love in a coach. And that's what Coach Z basically taught me that night was, you're not going to have all the same guys. You can't block this all the same way. You can't do this all the same way. And I've kind of filtered that through to kind of everything that I do. And it really helped me as a coach and as a teacher to realize, okay, that kid doesn't learn like this one does. This one likes visual. It's even like my own kids. You know, my son wants to do everything in his head. My daughter wants to write everything down, and trying to help them, especially math, because that was my subject, trying to help them and figure out what worked. That's the magic. And when you've been around, when you've seen, when you can, think back to, man, what did I do with that? Oh man, we had that receiver at Humboldt State back in '87, and
which is where Prince played and coached a little bit.
Oh, was it Humboldt State? Really?
Yeah. He started. He started at San Bernardino Valley College, played there 2 years, and then went to Humboldt State, finished his playing career there, and then he was like a GA, I think, right out of college or shortly thereafter. So weird
trivia fact: I think Humboldt State's football program shut down a few years ago after they had Alex Kappa, I believe. Now they could have come back. I'm not totally sure, but I want to say that they closed the program down. Maybe they came back. Their last season was 2018. I think Alex Kappa was either that year or the year before. Now he's playing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Either way, the point being, God, why did Humboldt State come up?
Because of him. That's where he probably had seen that at some point.
Yeah, I've probably seen it some point. Anyways, the point being, you can refer back to some player that was too short, too small, too slow, too something, but you got something out of him and out of him or her, depending on what sport you coach, and that you can apply and say, hey, wait a second, when I had this guy, I had this player, we did this with them. And I think that's the point of having experienced coaches that have been around and seen some different things, and obviously camping, getting away from Green Bay for a few years, seeing some different things, and now bringing it to the Texans and hopefully getting that production out of them. And it's such an important part of the coaching business, because we're not all blessed with guys, 5 guys like Laramie. I could go out and coach Laramie, like, hey, Laramie, go block him. And he'd be like, okay. I mean, we'd love for it to be that easy, but it is not. But, hopefully, our listeners will get the point. And that is, when you have different experiences and you're not blessed with all those players and that talent, you got to find a way to do it. You got to find a way to get it done. And Campion's gotten it done. Robert Prince has gotten it done. And hopefully they'll get it done here with the Texans.
Amen. All right. It's always good talking with you, John. And I can't wait to do it again. This has been In the Lab, and we'll be back again next Tuesday. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to know when we post new content.